Right now, the world is split along demographic lines in a way that's more consequential than most people notice. Africa is getting younger, faster than anywhere else. Meanwhile, Europe, Japan, and parts of North America are aging, and their populations are shrinking or stagnating. This is not some social story. This is economic, it is security related, and it's deeply political. Every new worker in Lagos or Nairobi adds to the potential labor pool, the tax base, the local market for goods and services. Each young adult entering the workforce can also become a consumer, an innovator, or a military recruit. That growth compounds because the dependency ratio, which is the number of working age people relative to children and the elderly, favors the young. When structured properly, the ratio creates what economists call a demographic dividend, but it doesn't happen automatically. Schools have to actually educate people. Infrastructure has to support them. Jobs need to exist, or at least opportunities to create them. And yes, governance matters because a population this large, this energetic, requires systems that work, or the potential advantage becomes a liability. Look at it step by step. More people can produce goods. More goods generate wealth. Wealth attracts investment. Investment enables infrastructure projects, which then support more economic activity. Militaries can recruit from a larger pool, giving states more security options. So the logic is pretty simple and it is structural. Youth equals leverage. The systems that control the resources, finances, and technology now respond to the direction of population. Africa isn't just young, it is growing in a way that will, over the next few decades, dwarf most other regions. United Nations projections suggest that by 2050, roughly one quarter of the global population growth will come from the continent of Africa. Nigeria alone is expected to add tens of millions of people. Ethiopia and the Democratic Republic of the Congo aren't far behind. The sheer scale of the shift changes the way global markets work. Aging nations facing declining labor forces look to Africa not just for cheap labor, but as a place to invest, to tap into growing consumer markets, and even to partner on security. So let's think about this practically. If a multinational company wants to expand in the next 20 years, they are not prioritizing Japan or Germany. They are looking at where populations are increasing, where cities are growing, where mobile connectivity is spreading. If Africa can invest in digital infrastructure, in industrial parks, transportation networks, and education systems that actually train people for the jobs that exist and the ones that are coming, the continent isn't just a potential growth engine. It becomes an indispensable hub for the global economy. And yet, there is still a gap. Policy and governance frameworks often lag behind demographic realities. Some leaders are still operating with old assumptions about where wealth and influence come from. They underestimate the opportunity cost of delay, and the cost is not only economic. Security. A youthful population that is unemployed or undereducated can destabilize regions, but the same population, when harnessed properly, becomes an extraordinary strategic advantage. The fact is that Africa had opportunities before, and our leaders fumbled them because they lacked that thing, perhaps. But now Africa has that thing. Africa also has all the numbers working in our favor: the money, the infrastructure, skills, wisdom to actually take back the leadership position that has always been ours in the world. But it is not going to happen if we continue to listen to old farts who don't care about anyone else's future but their own families. You won't be able to access the opportunities for your own children and grandchildren if you still allow yourself to remain ignorant of your position in affecting change for a better today. Stop making excuses about how Africa was sold off hundreds of years ago, or poverty this and poverty that. If you are watching this video on YouTube or TikTok or wherever else it may be, you obviously have some skin in the game. Sure, you will feel inadequate or confused or have to contend with really hard questions about, well, what can I do? And honestly, the most important thing right now is to first understand how exactly the world runs right now. Find a place in this current system that you can disrupt and turn into your own golden treasure and do things one day at a time. Trust me, you have time. The world doesn't really move as quickly as people would have you believe it does. As long as you are showing up consistently, the world is yours to shape. But if you see yourself as useless, then you will end up 5 years down the line really seeing how things have changed. And because you are not enforcing your own changes, it didn't turn out the way you had hoped. Hope is great. Hope is great. But you know what's even better? Doing. Africa's demographic strength translates directly into workforce leverage, but only if it is managed intelligently. A young population can supply labor for agriculture, manufacturing, technology, and services simultaneously, but without proper planning, the potential advantage becomes a heavy burden. Think of it like a complex system, right? You have more people, but the connections between them, like the roads, schools, hospitals, energy, and the internet, have to scale as well. If you have the workers, but no infrastructure, productivity stalls. If you have infrastructure, but untrained workers, investment fails. Companies looking to expand into Africa evaluate both factors very carefully. That is why some nations with smaller populations but better managed urban hubs can outperform numerically larger neighborhoods or neighbors. Investment risks are also political. Governments must negotiate terms that protect long term growth rather than simply accepting whatever short term foreign capital is offered. Look at the recent deals in East Africa. Several Chinese backed infrastructure projects, part of the Belt and Road Initiative, have faced scrutiny because of debt obligations and local content issues. It's not that foreign money is bad, I mean, far from it, but the terms and conditions dictate who ultimately benefits. Leaders who structure investments to capture technology transfer, workforce development, and long term revenue create strategic advantages. Those who don't risk leaving wealth and influence in foreign hands, which undermines sovereignty even in a booming demographic environment. In fact, Africa's youth is leverage only if systems are deliberately designed to channel it into productive, sustainable growth. The consequences of Africa's demographic trajectory are visible globally. Western nations, particularly in Europe and East Asia, are confronting declining populations, shrinking labor forces, and rising dependency ratios. This constrains economic expansion and increases the pressure to maintain welfare systems for aging citizens. In response, some countries are turning to automation and artificial intelligence to compensate for smaller workforces. Immigration is another tool, but it carries social and political friction. Meanwhile, Africa's growth position is an increasingly critical partner or competitor in global supply chains, investment flows, and trade networks. Nations that previously dominated global markets may find themselves negotiating from a weaker position because they lack the population base to sustain rapid industrial or technological scaling. Africa, in contrast, can offer both labor and domestic markets in the same package, making it strategically attractive. Yet the balance is so delicate. Demographic advantage alone does not equal global dominance. Policy and governance and education and infrastructure and financial systems all determine how effectively that population translates into power. Africa's position challenges traditional notions of influence and it forces global powers to rethink assumptions about where growth, innovation, and security capacities will come from in the coming decades. The leverage shifts not because of ideology, but because demographics and infrastructure are the real determinants of what nations can do. It's not really just about young people or old people. It's more about how the whole system adjusts as those numbers shift. Who actually builds the roads, the power grids, the internet? Who keeps the laws and rules running? Who ends up benefiting from all the money and the technology? That is what shapes power over time. Africa's population is growing, and it is growing fast. And if there is money flowing in, factories, schools, networks of digital infrastructure, it changes how influence spreads even across borders. Sure, Western countries still have banks, tech, big institutions, and such, but as Africa's economies expand, their leverage in negotiations feels smaller. Being in control of your own investment, keeping supply chains secure, getting infrastructure right, that is what really gives a country weight. If you're just along for the ride and depending on someone else, you lose some of that independence. Slowly but surely, the system does not stay still. Trade and labor and capital, they all shift depending on who can actually make the rules stick, who can run the networks, who can push them further. Power is not tied to old hierarchies or even politics, really. It shows up where people understand the connections between the resources, skills, population, and institutions, and where they can shape them to work for them. The youth thing matters, but it's just one factor. What really counts is having the networks, the money, the infrastructure under our control. And as all these pieces move and grow, who ends up holding power is just the result of how nations play the system today. It's built into the day to day decisions, which is what we should be showing up for. That's all I'm going to say.